Hello, good morning. How many of you were at the dinner yesterday? Quite a few. We had a fun conversation, and contrary to Johannesburg, which was the first stop of our trip, yesterday the dinner preceded the talk, which hopefully didn't confuse too many of those listening to the Q&A, because actually the talk is kind of the foundation of a deeper opportunity to ask questions and to really try to see what are the ways that the themes that we will be talking about apply to what people feel they can do with this knowledge concretely in their lives. And my objective today is to deliver that kind of foundation. And we will also have panel sessions, and then after lunch, when you will come back, we will have also ways of talking about some of the technologies that embody the principles that I'm going to expose today. It would be wonderful to have back the slides, since we felt we debugged the video. It is for me a privilege to be here, because for me talking to audiences like you is not only a way to expose what I know, but also oftentimes a way for me to learn. Actually, I encourage all of you to do that, to immediately go for the, wow, it did it again. Sorry, guys. To immediately go forward as soon as you learn something, to start sharing it with others. Today, the barriers for achieving that are really non-existent. And I know there are people who abuse that power. They become shills for a given type of message. And you don't want to be, of course, confused with that kind of excessive enthusiasm, whatever the reason. However, being able to get the feedback that you gain by going out and experimenting rapidly with what you can do in technology today is really powerful. At Singularity University, we have a saying. We say, AI is easy, AV is really hard. These two images represent the two themes that we are going to talk about today. Exponential technologies on one side and decentralization on the other. We will talk about exponential technologies more in detail. It is how today's world is characterized by rapidly changing phenomena interacting with each other, opposed to a way to see the world that is linear, very easily predictable. And decentralization is opposed to a centralized and hierarchical organization of economic activities, social structures, and it is not necessarily easier, but is much more resilient and adaptable, and better adapted to the needs of today's world. The best example of exponential technologies that all of you are familiar with is information technology. How at the end of the 80s we used personal computers that became ever more powerful. We were accustomed to change our computers every 4 or 5 years maybe. And then we moved on to mobile phones, and the mobile phones, which now are really supercomputers in our pocket, represent this kind of acceleration very well, because rather than changing them every 4 or 5 years, many of us change them every 2 years, maybe every year. Actually, recently it was quite a scandal that Apple was caught slowing down the phones that were older, and they claim it is because blah, 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 blah. But actually, the features that are available in the most recent phones are amazing. And they are not the last on this curve, because we are already installing by the billions, actually tens of billions, the nodes of the next generation of networks, what we call the Internet of Things, sensors and actuators that are understanding our world in ever finer detail. This is what we study and teach at Singularity University with funding by Google at the NASA Research Park in California. And recently we also started a global expansion. There is now Singularity University in South Africa as well. The first Singularity University Summit was held last year, and this year is going to be in October. I believe it's in Johannesburg, and I hope many of you will be able to attend. It is a 2-day event getting really deep in about a lot of themes in finance, in robotics, in nanotechnology, biotechnology, all kinds of exciting areas where the world is rapidly changing. We talk about the fact that at the beginning, the way that exponential technologies develop may not appear very surprising or even significant. We call that kind of the deceptive phase of exponential change, where actually hidden among the noise of what is happening, it is easy to believe that what we are looking at is not even an exponential trend, or that actually a linear interpolation is not only more accurate, but more desirable. It gives better outcomes. But then what happens is that unrelentingly, through the progressive doublings, which in information technology is called Moore's Law by Gordon Moore, one of the pioneers of electronics and integrated circuits, who predicted that we would be able to design circuits that doubled the number of transistors for a given area in a chip. Well, exponentials become just disruptive in every area that they touch. And through that, they really start to transform that particular area of the economy or society, dematerializing, demonetizing, and democratizing access to what maybe initially was a very elite product or service that only a few people could either afford or be ready to experiment with. I love keeping in touch with audiences like you. So feel free to connect on LinkedIn. On Facebook, I maxed out. You can follow me. All of my posts are public, but I won't be able to reciprocate your request for connection on Twitter or every other platform. I am very easy to find and to Google. And for me, really, it is great to receive not only the questions in real time that you will want to ask me, but also afterwards, if you have some time to think about the topics that we touch upon and something comes into your mind, just don't hesitate to reach out and to ask. The kind of changes that we are seeing are really due to the fact that in some amazing way that we are still in the process of completely understanding, our species for the past thousands and tens of thousands and even hundreds of thousands of years has been co-evolving with technology. Whether these are the flint stones that we used for hunting, or the fire that progressively we used at an ever better degree, or our ability to transform the world through the power of our imagination, creativity, and passion. In Egyptian times, this power and the exhilaration that it gave was a privilege that within the Egyptian society, exactly one person could take advantage of. It was the pharaoh. The pharaoh had a great freedom. He could say, yeah, let's build a pyramid. And they did it. And everybody else had to obey. It is the perfectly hierarchical and centralized society, perfectly represented by the pyramid, which today in too many companies is still the organizational chart, unfortunately. But that was a kind of society that the technology of the time could express. There was no alternative. Through the Middle Ages, there were indications of a change that was starting to happen. In the cities, through artisanal accomplishments or trade and commerce, a new class of people started to emerge who shared, at least to some degree, that sensation of being able to decide for themselves what to do. And in the industrial age, this became even more widespread. Today, we are at a point where our social support infrastructure created a global environment where every individual should share the opportunity of an incredibly increased number of degrees of freedom in order to design their own lives. You know, and whether they will decide, let's build a pyramid like the pharaoh would, or they will concentrate their energy and their opportunity to something else is to be seen. But exactly because there will be millions and billions of people in the same situation, the interactions of these desires and these energies is what gives us the possibility of progressing in understanding the world at an ever finer detail as we search in an exploration for the solutions that are adapted at any time to the challenges that we are facing. Because these challenges are pretty big. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs was in orbit for millions of years before hitting Earth. The dinosaurs were completely oblivious to the menace of that asteroid. And I'm telling you, the asteroid that is going to kill humanity is on orbit today. Can we accept to be equally oblivious to its menace? Can we be as blind as they were? Or we do have the power to look into our telescopes, to track the asteroid, to find how to potentially deflect it from its orbit or whatever is going to be the solution in order to make a future history that is different from the one that they suffered. So as we explore what is the best way to organize our dreams and our desires in order to make them into reality, we discover all kinds of tools. And one of the most powerful tools that we discovered in order to do that is, of course, the enterprise, the corporation. The corporation, both as a legal entity and as an instrument for concentrating human ingenuity and material resources towards certain goals. And then whether that goal is, selling more gadgets or going to the moon, this is how basically the way that a corporation should work look like forever. But whether it is a spontaneous coordination of a few dozen people, like there could be any Facebook group, or the incredible, unexpected possibility of something beautiful emerging from tens or hundreds of thousands of people working together on a platform like Wikipedia, which nobody could have predicted that was possible before everybody seeing that it could actually exist. By the way, who has made a search on Google or any search engine where then the result where you clicked on was a Wikipedia page? Right? Practically everybody. Who ever either created or modified a page on Wikipedia? Okay, just a few, that's fine. The next question would be, and I'm not going to ask it, who is an expert who found a page that was wrong on Wikipedia? And then the fourth question would be, and a minute later, was it still wrong? Or did you realize that as an expert, it was your advantage and your duty to go in and change that page and make it better and share your knowledge in order to improve everybody's chances of learning what is right rather than what is wrong? That is what we can now do in a totally distributed and decentralized manner, achieving incredible results. And I'm not alone in saying this. There are a lot of people, whether they are people like Peter, who founded Singularity University and other exciting initiatives, or whether they are investors, premier protagonists of the New York venture capital scene, or inventors and engineers like Ray, the other founder of Singularity University, referring to AI at his first job at the age of over 60 as director of engineering at Google. Decentralization is today a fundamentally superior adaptation to the needs and possibilities of the world, opposed to a centralized approach. And amazingly, the most centralized and the most hierarchical of the organizations, the nation states, also realize that. The nation states feel under pressure because they feel maladapted to the world of today. And the leaders of nation states, some of them, are waking up to the fact that a novel approach is really needed. And it is needed not only from a technological point of view, not only from an economic point of view, but it may be needed from a political and social approach as well. Today we are not going to get deep unless your questions will lead me there. What are the political and social implications of decentralization? They are absolutely profound. In order to explore some of these implications, I created several years ago Network Society Research, a think tank based in London that is now in 40 countries, studying how central and local organizations are able to enact policies that can further or hinder the ability of a community or a society to be well aligned with these changes. We are actually free, both as individuals and as societies, to say, you know, I love that thing. I want to explore what it means. I want my fellow members of this community together with me to analyze and understand and implement the implications. Or on the contrary, we are free to say, wow, that really freaks me out. I want to be as late and as slow as possible in adopting that and in looking at what it can do. But as I would, over the years, travel literally all over the world, from Tokyo to Bangkok to London to Paris to Buenos Aires to Cape Town, I would really see that passion and creativity and the self-selection mechanisms that people can enjoy today would lead to teams forming around ideas that want to powerfully change the world not only for incredible financial upside, which is possible and desirable, but also in order to achieve a positive impact, to change the world for good. And that is why I created Network Society Ventures, which is a seed stage investment firm catalyzing startups at the intersection of exponential technologies and decentralization through the injection of the capital they need in order to execute powerfully on their plans. And Network Society Lab, which is a venture development organization allowing startups to professionalize their operations, especially oriented towards the tokenization of their business models based on blockchain, and potentially the design, implementation, and execution of token sales, also known as initial coin offerings. Spreading these is crucially important. The knowledge really that people can gain today that is actionable is fundamental. And the latest in our group of companies is Network Society Media, which has the mandate of both creating as well as aggregating and syndicating content around powerful, actionable knowledge like this. I wrote the Network Society Manifesto that analyzed and then synthesized what I call the fundamental thesis of the Network Society. This is, I think, worth really kind of reading out loud. It says that our society is embodying the technology available at any given time, and that the society, regardless of our ideals and utopistic desires, can sustain its shape only if the supporting technologies are solid and have taken root. Otherwise, those dreams will fail and disappear. Revolutions will wither. And that indeed, today we are seeing a new generation of technologies taking root and potentially representing a new support for the expression and the forming of a new kind of society. And that this kind of distributed and decentralized set of technologies will outperform very naturally because they are better adapted to the needs of the world today, the previous generation. And that, as a consequence, as these technologies are actually unstoppable, there will be a great disruption of what today is the dominating form of society, the nation state, to lead towards what I call network society, which will be the emerging form after the phase transformation in our socio-economic organization is complete. Of course, until the next one, whatever that is. Let me give you a series of concrete examples what I mean. I have been talking a little bit in the abstract, referring to this and that, but without giving you examples. There are many, many all around us, very easily recognizable. And my objective today is a little bit to hack your brain for you to then walk out of the room today and then go out in the city of beautiful Cape Town and see the world with different eyes. We have been living in the 20th century in the age of oil. A lot of what we did, including the Green Revolution that feeds 8 billion people, where the report of the Club of Rome in the 60s predicted that by the 80s we would have had widespread famine killing billions of people. Well, that Green Revolution in industrial agriculture was also made possible by oil and by the energy density of this incredible source. But today, in a manner that is completely different than before, rather than relying on 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 global sources of energy, we are looking at solar photovoltaics that is becoming ever cheaper, ever more inexpensive, outcompeting every other source of energy, not only oil, but even carbon. And it is totally decentralized. You can put up solar panels anywhere you want, anywhere the sun is shining. Anybody can look at the neighbor's solar panel and ask, how is it going? Should I buy one too? And then proceed accordingly, rather than the kind of billion-dollar investments that new carbon plants, let alone nuclear plants, require with 20, 30-year ROI calculations. I can see immediately, within a few months, certainly in the course of a year or two, whether I was right, making that, I don't know, $10,000 investment for putting solar on my roof. Digital manufacturing, where 3D printing and other technologies are fundamentally transforming the way we look at capital that is deployed rather than in the capacity to produce 1 million of identical things, where I typically would send the order to the Chinese and then start the advertising campaign, waiting for the ships to go through the entire world to deliver the packages, and I would fill shelves with 3 times the quantity of product that I hope to sell, because I would never want the shelves to be empty if I am lucky and the advertising works, just to throw them into the garbage because it turns out that I overestimated by 20 or 30% what the production should have been. What happens here instead is that I can produce a few hundred, maybe a few thousand of these objects, and then measure very precisely whether they do what they have to, or I need to improve on the design or some feature, and iterate rapidly in a much more local and a closer loop of evaluation together with my customers, who are often involved, giving me feedback and comments in an open conversation that improves rapidly what the product is, but produce it in numbers that never lead to the incredible wastes that consumer society made us believe was necessary. And importantly, it accrues a lot of value to the designer, the creator, the person who is able to give beauty and functionality to a lump of plastic or metal, which for the machine that lays it down layer by layer makes no difference, whether it is a stupid cube of raw material or something extremely functional and beautiful. Hydroponics, which, I spend a lot of time in New York, skyscrapers all around. Imagine, and today this is actually possible. Already in the skyscrapers, there are 1 or 2 stories at the bottom where the washing machines are, and washers and dryers and whatever else. If we put hydroponics, aquaponics, aeroponics with LED lighting that are able to grow in an incredible variety what is consumed inside the skyscraper itself, with very little use of energy, almost no use of soil, no use of pesticides because it is a controlled environment, with 0 use of energy to transport the food because it is locally produced, and fundamentally transforming agricultural output from being proportional to the area available to the volume. Today we believe, oh my God, 9 billion people, we are hitting the ceiling here, we have to stop. Well, maybe, except that biology was not able to evolve solutions that overcame the limitations of the surface of the planet. No biological entity goes lower than a few hundred meters, with a few exceptions, below the surface of the ocean, and none of them go more than a few thousand meters above. But we can. And there is literally no limit to the number of people that we can feed, which is lucky because we don't know whether 9 billion people are enough to find a solution to the asteroid that is coming. Maybe we need 20 billion people in order to breed the genius that is going to find that solution that saves us all. Human creativity, or the brains that we can waste, is the biggest mistake that we can do today as well as tomorrow. We cannot afford to waste that kind of incredibly precious resource. The bacon there is fake. The Mobius strip, some of you know, is a cool mathematical object, but pigs don't do that. What that represents is that we are even 3D printing meat, cultivating meat, which is a process that created the first synthetic hamburger a few days ago that a delegation from Singularity University, together with others in London, very ceremoniously ate. It wasn't very good. It didn't have fat, only muscle cells, and a single hamburger patty cost over $250,000. But exponentials, duh. I met last week or 2 weeks ago in Prague the head of this research, who is a Dutchman, and he told me that they are ready to scale. Today, the same patty would cost $30 rather than $300,000. And they believe that within a few years, they will be the cheapest source of animal protein on the planet. Once again, 95+% reduction in the use of soil, energy, water, and no animal suffering, because you are just creating the cells you eat, and you are not, creating the whole animal that then you have to slaughter. Personalized health, where you become responsible for your state of health. Peer-to-peer learning, teaching and learning at the same time, just reaching out and realizing that there are self-selecting communities that resonate with your passion everywhere and anywhere in the world. This is the context of blockchain and Bitcoin. It is not a fad or a freak phenomenon, but within the deep and broad context of a socio-economic transformation that is sweeping the world. And trust networks that compete with the violence-based imposition of our social rules, representing an alternative that is much better to share a common understanding of how to behave. Airbnb doesn't compete with hospitality. Uber does not compete with transportation. Well, both of them do, but the real disrupted thing is what we thought was the only way to impose the social peace. Police is what not going to be needed anymore when we understand that it is to our advantage not to trash an Airbnb apartment, because we will be caught 100% of the time, and we will not be able to use the service of that kind of network anymore. Policymaking and governance are really hard nuts to crack. When Churchill a few years ago quipped that democracy is the worst kind of government except every other kind, we thought he was joking. And we afforded not to take on what really was a challenge. He was challenging us to come up with something better, and we failed him. It is time to understand what are the limits of representative democracy that we can overcome thanks to technology, because now we have mobile phones, we have sensors, we can measure feedback cycles with a speed that wasn't available before, and telling somebody, for the next 4 years or whatever amount of time, I trust you, you will be the one to do the best possible job for me wherever, is really an antiquated notion that maybe worked when Washington would leave Franklin and govern for a given amount of years, but not now when our communications are instantaneous across the globe. There are incredible numbers of mainstream media publications that will tell you each of these technologies, identifying them as if they were a fad, a passing crazy, geeky notion that will fade away. But if you look at it in context, you realize they are unstoppable. And the incumbent interests that are around us, the bureaucracies that have evolved in order to resist the change that is unstoppably coming, are using the excuse of protecting the unwashed masses of ignorant people who need to be defended against this incredibly shiny light that is impossible to tolerate of knowledge and power. They shouldn't have it, in order to actually hide their state of panic. A little bit like your immune system when you are allergic to nuts would tell you, what? You want to eat a nut? I'd rather kill you than letting you eat a nut. That is the same thing that is happening today when the DNA sequencing organization called 23andMe is told by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration of the United States, that they are not allowed to let any of you know what is your genetic makeup. Because only the priesthood of doctors is knowledgeable enough in order to bear the responsibility of this sacred knowledge. And none of you should have access to it. Or the state of New York, the veritable center of the financial world in the planet, that after 2 years of debate implements the so-called BIT license, imposing compliance costs on blockchain startups proportionally higher than those imposed on banks, with the consequence of dozens and dozens of startups leaving New York and not even serving you the browser page if you connect to them and you are located in New York. Basically, New York saying, well, it was fun, now we want to pass the baton. We don't want the new to infect our cozy world of banking because that is so precious to us. We are ready to give up the future in order to protect the past. The most poignant happened just last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago. Facebook, Google, Twitter, all in unison made the decision that it was fun, billions of dollars, tens, hundreds of billions of dollars, dominating the advertising industry, transforming how we look at the world through social networks, search engines, and whatever Twitter is. But it's fine, it's over. It's better to have a new generation of startups understanding how you can apply decentralized due diligence, artificial intelligence, or whatever the technique is going to be needed in order to decide what cryptocurrency ad is worth accepting the money from. Because today, Facebook, Google, and Twitter are saying there is no amount of money that is worth to touch if you belong to a given category of economic activity. Just a blanket ban, which is hiding their state of panic and ignorance and their protection of their own status quo, rather than running the risk of discovering something new that they cannot afford to even glimpse because it's too bright. In Hawaii, it was incredible. There is a law in Hawaii that says solar panels must be connected to the national grid, the electric grid, because there is this notion that I don't even know the logic, but basically the pretense is that the solar panels need to stabilize the grid, or these, I don't know. I cannot explain. Regardless, there is this law, and since solar panel installations were exploding and the utility company on the island couldn't absorb the excess energy that was being fed into the grid at ever-increasing rates, the solution, prohibition on solar panel installations. All over the state of Hawaii. Woo-hoo-hoo, fantastic. It took them a year to realize, maybe we should change the law. And they did, and now solar is exploding again, and the grid can do whatever the grid does because it has been doing it for 100 years, who cares? But an alternative now is allowed to be born. This is the most tragic and tragically important chart. The International Energy Agency publishes a report year after year that says the growth of installed capacity is plateauing in solar. They are saying it was a good run, now it's the year 2002, and the growth that we have seen year after year of installed capacity is no more. Now, for the next 30 years, year after year, the additional capacity in solar installations is going to be more or less the same. And then in 2003, they go back and say, oh, well, in 2002 we were wrong, but now in 2003, really this plateau has arrived. We are sorry. Solar was great, but there's no more that can be achieved by solar. And then in 2004, they go back and say, oh, yeah, we were wrong, but now we are right. And they do this for 15 plus years, never questioning their own methodology, never questioning their linear outlook on the world, never questioning how is it possible that the premier authority on energy in the world is issuing hopelessly misleading reports that are then taken by investors, policymakers, entrepreneurs, who in turn are misled by its ignorant, absurd recommendations. But if all of this is unstoppable and the cages of the old type of thinking can be opened because there is no barrier to the experimentation, and you can analyze how to create societies that welcome it in order to reap the rewards of understanding what the future can bring, then as I was able to see all over the world, you can create incredible opportunities for wealth creation, for entrepreneurial zeal, for new degrees of freedom that can be explored. And this is the thesis translated in all kinds of languages. We have also the Zulu and the Afrikaans translation. If there is a Xhosa speaker, we are still waiting for that, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And I heard there are 11 official African languages, South African languages, so we are missing a few. I'm very proud of this one, which is native Maori from New Zealand. And learning is going to be promoted in an app that we are creating that is going to reward these learning steps of the users of the app by granting them Network Society token in order to allow those people to learn and teach actionably together with our partners like Wealth Migrate and others whose platforms are going to be included as an on-ramp to embracing change for everybody to design their own lives. In all these sectors, giving people a toolbox for new organizations that empower and emancipate individuals through experiential learning, giving them dignity in communities that are resilient, that can find how to coexist with ever smarter machines who are not our enemies. Our enemies are the dumb machines. Our human talent is an incredible resource that we can and should not eliminate from the equation. We have to cherish it and to support it, to include it, to champion it. AI through hardware, software, big data is evolving very, very fast. And AI is going to be a new source of creativity for human talent. We will be able to design incredible societies, incredible opportunities for all of us inclusively together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. That really was incredible. What is the time now that we got? Okay, so there is some time for questions immediately. Does anybody in the room have any questions for David? Or do you want to mull over it and wait for later this afternoon to ask them? Have you got a question over here?
Restrictions that they are now putting on things like Bitcoin go away?
The restrictions on Bitcoin in
Yes, I put a mint in
certain
my mouth.
countries like China, for example, are, well, and then they are not really on Bitcoin, they are on ICOs and exchanges, act on the interfaces between the old world and the new world. Prohibiting Bitcoin itself is as impossible as prohibiting mathematics. I cannot make it illegal for you to draw 2 + 2 = 4 on a piece of paper, and equally it would be impossible to prohibit blockchain and Bitcoin. It is actually the end result of a long evolution over the course of decades. And there have been unsuccessful previous generations of digital money that were successfully killed because they didn't have this kind of resilient, decentralized feature. Now, the actions on the interfaces are enacted to protect the existing system. Regulators are in an impossible position. They have been elected or appointed to predict a future that is too complex for them to handle. What they should do, and those more enlightened are doing it, is to rapidly create some clear guidelines so that people know what they can do or cannot do, realizing that those guidelines will be necessarily wrong, and as a consequence, create a kind of a meta rule for sunsetting those guidelines automatically, so that in the course of a year or maybe 2 years, necessarily a new guideline has to be created, a new framework, incorporating what has been learned in the meantime. And that is how rapidly you can both satisfy the mandate of regulators and policymakers, as well as not kill the creativity and the innovation that is inside the new opportunities. There is a question. I forgot the rule. The first question must be asked by a woman. So the second question can be asked by a woman. All the men must shut up. And I will pick a woman if nobody asks a question. Oh, there is one there. No, he's a man. Take away the mic. I'm serious. There is a woman over there. Did she, where is the microphone? Show me the microphone. Okay, go there.
It's me. So David, thank you for recognizing the woman in the room. And I think I was chatting to you last night and saying, from the questions that the women were asking last night, we're obviously very curious about blockchain. So in your opinion, what are the 3 most important aspects that you think can empower women with regards to blockchain, and why should we really be concerned about this?
I'm not a woman, so I don't know. Actually, that is part of the answer. Work it out. You are smart enough. And I don't mean you individually. Yes, you are too, but all of you together. Because that is part of my message. There's no central authority that can tell you what are the consequences of these technologies, because nobody really knows deeply. Is it education? Is it the way that family roles are going to change? Is the patrilinear centralized family structure going to also be decentralized in some way? In some places, definitely it already is. So the empowerment and the financial inclusion of women maybe is what I would start with. In too many societies, women are disenfranchised. They don't have the monetary means, they don't have the financial support systems, and they are robbed of their opportunities. the sneaky nature of Bitcoin that evades Russia and China trying to kill it is going to also enable a wife that is abused to overcome her struggle and ally herself with others to empower herself, her family, her children, her community. I think that is going to be the case for millions of women who strive to create a better life for themselves and their community. So that is, I think, an important part. Smartphones are an incredible conduit for empowerment, and the more women learn how to use them, it is easy to create a meetup and just pretend that it is for crotcheting and then sneakily teach about Bitcoin, create some code word and flowery pretenses, and then just make it happen. It's possible.
Thanks so much, David. David will be speaking to us again after lunch, and then we do have the panel where there will be a chance to ask questions.